Sports.
Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports, taking up to 2 p.m. Joined by Brandon Nunez and Chris Watkins while they are getting settled in because it's going to be a bumpy ride. Let's hear from Mitch. Wants to be a part of the conversation. What's up, Mitch? What you got for us? Mitch? All right. Thanks, Mitch. As we get to the roundtable, Brendan is looking for
I do a pretty good Mitch.
a plug-in. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just wait for
Okay. Yeah. We'll come back.
to call back. Guys, how you doing?
Splendid.
Yeah.
You know, it's great times. It's great times right now. Sorry we couldn't join you last week. We actually both got sick on he got better and then I got sick. And so, you know, yeah, we're doing all right as far as good can go these days, you know, with the state of things.
Yeah. And look, I want to start here and give both of you the floor just on, and I know Return of the Roar is out, so go check that out wherever you get your podcast. Also, of course, on the Sactown YouTube, so go check that out as well. But yeah, I just want to give both of you the floor to just process how we got here and what the Kings should do next.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we got here. It's a long process. I mean, De'Aaron's been here, 7.5, 8 years. And I think that, to me, really the cherry on top is moving on from Mike Brown, a guy that De'Aaron Fox wanted to be around. He made that pretty clear this offseason and was complimentary of the continuity that was starting to build with this team. And by the way, I think San Antonio, being his preferred destination, reaffirms some of that. You know, that's maybe the most stable organization in the NBA. If from De'Aaron's perspective, seems like we've reached a point where it's hard for him to have faith in this organization. And what organization are you going to trust more than the Spurs? Right. You know, so I think that points towards that. I think also just there's a lot of little things that build up. It's drafting a bunch of guards in the lottery during De'Aaron's time here. It's the fact that Harrison Barnes and Keegan Murray are the only reliable two-way wings forwards that he's had as teammates for the past 7 seasons. It's the almost deals that have happened for this team, whether that's Kyle Kuzma a few years ago, or it seems like John Collins is kind of sitting there waiting this season. It's then coming to him and entertaining the idea of trading him before actually making that deal for the winger forward that he's been saying that we need for a long time. And I think that that's an easy reality to sort of be on board with on De'Aaron's side there. So I think that the not having a press conference after moving on from Mike Brown, De'Aaron Fox taking a lot of the brunt of that, having to come out and defend himself. You could go back to last year when Keon Ellis was going out after a press conference and everybody's like, where the heck is De'Aaron? And De'Aaron gets a bunch of crap for it. Turns out the team never asked him to speak, and he takes a bunch of crap for it. They never came out and defended him. So I think it's just a combination of things where from De'Aaron's perspective, you're probably fed up over it and lost any sort of remaining trust you had in this organization to be the one that you can actually compete on.
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a great job of laying it out there. I mean, just in simple terms, I mean, De'Aaron, you know, had Rich Paul go to Monty McNair and Westwood was that last year that we got that report and pretty much say, hey, can you improve things around here? Because we're not really comfortable locking ourselves in long term without knowing, are you guys going to be a perennial playoff team or are we going to continue to kind of play this play-in dance for the rest of De'Aaron's career? And I think fairly, De'Aaron Fox asked his organization, can we make some significant improvements? Since then, they did go out and get DeMar DeRozan to their credit. That does need to go into the front office's cap. But at the same time, they then fired Mike Brown after extending him. Now, granted, that's not the front office's money. That's Vivek's money. But it's pretty crazy to sign somebody to a new deal and then 6 months later can them. And then, you know, again, not continue to try and improve the team. And instead to, as Brendan just laid out, to go back to De'Aaron, and instead of saying, which, by the way, we have heard that the team was informed as recently as last week that a deal was happening. To then be told, hey, you know how you told us to go out and make the team better and go look for improvements? Well, instead, turns out like we were actually kind of like looking to see what we could get for you.
Right.
How else was he supposed to kind of react to that except for, okay, if you're telling me or if you're asking for permission, then yeah, sure, I guess, because I already asked you to make this situation better and you clearly had a different agenda, a different prerogative, and you went out and did that. So yeah, sure, go ahead. If you want to trade me, go ahead and trade me. I'm not going to stop you. And I think that's kind of where we're at now. I don't think De'Aaron ever formally requested a trade or anything like that. I think the Kings asked if he was willing, if he would be okay, if there would be hard feelings, if they looked at some of these offers. And De'Aaron pretty much said, if that's what you guys want to do, who am I to stop you?
I think the easiest thing from a fan base perspective is it seems like a lot of Kings fans don't have faith in the front office themselves in this organization to be moving forward. And I would just say that being a player in that spent 7-8 years of his career and is wondering, hey, what am I going to do for this next deal that's going to take me through my prime, who's, by the way, a hyper athletic point guard. And sometimes those guys fall off pretty quickly.
John Wall, Derrick Rose, Russell Westbrook.
If you're frustrated from a fan perspective with this team, imagine how frustrated you'd be if you were a player and your livelihood was really on the line with all this stuff.
If I'm playing devil's advocate, which, we've played all the angles here, and I don't even know if devil's advocate is the correct term, but when it comes to what De'Aaron, and we've been having some fun with just the locker room, and De'Aaron says, hey, this team is kind of trash, and everyone's looking around just thinking, who is he talking about? But going into this season, when they have that conversation, do either of you believe that it was actually still salvageable this year? Because kind of where I'm at with it, with all the stuff that you've laid out, Brendan, with all the stuff that you've laid out, Chris, was John Collins really going to save all that? Or as, De'Aaron's wife is saying, hey, we didn't actually ask for a trade, and we don't know what happened in that conversation. Are we sure at this point with everything that's happened that it was just get us one guy and let's rock and roll? Or was it, hey, we just need to be better, and the Kings are thinking, well, yeah, we've messed up in the past, whether they admitted it or not, we don't know. But now we can't cook everything to try to make up for it. It is what it is. Because I'm struggling with, I'm not struggling with the fact that De'Aaron wants the team to be better. I'm struggling with how realistic it was at this point, and whether or not we talked to Brett Siegel earlier, overselling for John Collins. Maybe they didn't want to do that because they didn't feel like that's enough to keep De'Aaron.
Yeah, I think it's tricky. I think it was a tall task in the first place, but I think the ask was more so like, give me a reason to trust you.
Right.
That you are going to at least continue to try.
So, but you're saying if they pull off John Collins, right, they slightly overpay, if in their mind, you think that would have been enough for De'Aaron to say, thank you, let's rock and roll?
I think maybe you're saying effort goes a long way.
Yeah, that is essentially that, hey, like, I just want to see that you're trying, that you're going to be a team that is going to try to go all in right now because this is my timeline.
Like, babe, I asked you to do the dishes and you come home and the dishes are done.
Right.
Right?
Right. And it's just the effort. It's showing that, like, you're on the same timeline as me here. Mm-hmm. Like, we're both thinking that it's now. And they didn't give a reason to do that. I think firing Mike Brown also points against that. So
right.
I would say, like, maybe if you make a John Collins deal, if you have faith in Mike Brown to stick around, and I get that wasn't going well, and in hindsight, that deal moving on from him looks fine right now. Mm-hmm. But Mike was very focused on, like, the long-term eventual championship. And even if that means a little hiccups in the regular season, we're focused on the playoffs. And I think that De'Aaron's focused on the same thing. And it doesn't seem like the organization is. So I think, to what Chris has said, it's more about the intent, and showing that intent would go a long way. It certainly doesn't lock in like for sure De'Aaron would stick around. You trade for John Collins, you keep Mike Brown. Not what I'm saying, but it changes. I think this is about his perspective on faith and trust in this organization. Again, to just continue to be on the same timeline as him, that it's about right now, prove to me that you think the same thing and that we are going to try and do something with this current team. And they, have not given him that indication. I think just based on their actions and all the little things we mentioned previously, I think are a couple cherries on top that are just added frustration. So I don't think it would guaranteed save things, but it's a better messaging to the guy that has been pretty clear throughout his whole career that he would prefer to do it here. And I don't think that like just goes out the window on all of this. I actually think he's been pretty loyal to Sacramento throughout most of this. And it's not like he's asking to go to some big city. He's asking to go to another city that's probably the same market size as Sacramento.
Smaller.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
River.
Exactly.
It's beautiful.
And so I think that it would have helped his belief in the organization that they are also trying to make it happen during what he views as his timeline.
And clearly they weren't willing. Well, from what we're hearing, they weren't willing to take that chance. They thought we've messed up too much that we don't want to take a chance on John Collins and then you still leave, which I mean, shoot, the John Collins thing could still happen. Like we could still talk about a De'Aaron Fox trade and whatever of these original deals. Wouldn't that be crazy
that we were talking about?
Brett didn't shut it down. I think I just listened to the
no,
you guys did, right? He didn't completely shut down that sense. That he just essentially said this is how their time is being occupied at this moment.
Basically the timeline was they were talking about, so they were kind of in the middle of the deal. The Kings were the ones that got cold feet. And it had kind of froze, and then this De'Aaron stuff comes out. So I guess the question becomes, the Kings are getting cold feet, and maybe part of the cold feet was whoever called about De'Aaron Fox, and then they decide, well, maybe we could do this. I don't know if you saw the report. It was, I think, Flippin from the Kings Herald had said that they then went from John Collins to Cam Johnson, but I don't know. I saw that. Yeah,
well, I think it makes sense timeline wise that like it sounded like a John Collins deal was pretty much lined up, right? All but done. And maybe that meant that like it was done but contingent on something else happening first. There's a lot of scenarios where like one trade can hold up the whole market.
The Jimmy Butler trade,
and the Jimmy Butler trade is definitely what I'm getting to, that maybe Utah had some aspect of, hey, we think we're going to be the third team here. And if this happens, then we'll do the John Collins trade. Or maybe Sacramento was trying to be the third team in a Miami deal. Like, I don't know in that aspect. So maybe it was sitting there contingent on something else happening first. But the fact that the team was also just in New York for 4 days, by the way. They had a day off before they played the Knicks, a day in between they played Brooklyn, and my understanding is that they also stayed there the day after they played Brooklyn. They had 4 days where Monty McNair, front office, went on this trip, and you'd imagine that's an opportunity to go have those conversations about Cam Johnson.
Right.
And, I think obviously a deal hasn't taken place at this point, so that tells you at least an extent of how those conversations went. And from their perspective, it makes sense to entertain De'Aaron deals. Like, he already had this conversation with you after you fire Mike Brown. I already felt like writing was on the wall. If it wasn't, I didn't expect the deadline to be what we were talking about, but I definitely thought this was probably done in the offseason. And so from a front office perspective, you'd rather entertain it right now. Your offers are probably better right now.
Right.
And it makes sense to do that. But again, I understand De'Aaron's frustration on the other side of this, and it just puts you in a weird spot where it's like, all right, what is this direction going to look like? And the other complicated caveat here is that, like, we don't even know that this front office was going to make it through this offseason.
Right. And if you do move on from De'Aaron, what, you just get a redo? You get to hit the reset and restart with
they're not going to fully rebuild.
No, but but so we got to get to the other side. But my question is, because I want your guys' thoughts on this. If we're all okay with not okay, but we understand the idea of entertaining, where is it that they went wrong? There's a lot of blame being placed on how this got out, who this would benefit, where exactly, and everybody just has their pitchforks in the front offices. They're the easy ones to kind of go after, but we all can agree, hey, you got to listen. So where was that misstep? And we let Chris and Brendan put their GM hats on, and we ask them what would they do next. Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports. Allen Stiles, sorry, we're just catching up. Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports, taking up to 2 p.m. as we are joined by Chris Watkins and Brendan Nunez, our Sactown Sports Kings insiders. They're taking us up to 2 p.m. Whitey Gleason, no crosstalk today. We will hear from Whitey Gleason tomorrow, and we discuss the blame that some people have been placing on the front office and where things exactly went wrong. So, guys, they get the call, and Brendan, great job laying out the kind of New York aspect of this and why the John Collins thing maybe got put on pause. Let's see what Cam was their number one. Let's see what Cam Johnson has going and how that kind of went on from there. The John Collins deal gets weird and they don't get Cam Johnson, and then somebody decides to call. We still don't know who that is. I'm sure we'll find out at some point about De'Aaron Fox, and they decide to tell De'Aaron. It gets out. It gets to Shams. It gets out in other local outlets, and everybody is saying that for some reason, maybe that the front office wanted it to get out, but from Kyle and I's perspective, it feels like the agents would want this to get out. So where exactly do you feel like the front office went wrong with this? Because we can all agree in a level-headed fashion that listening to the offer isn't terrible. It doesn't matter how comfortable you are. You can listen. So from the moment they got the call, where did things go south?
I mean, I have to feel like it went south before that.
I think it did.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like too.
Yeah, I think, as is everything, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but I think it's mainly the firing of Mike Brown and that really taking a big hit on De'Aaron's feelings on the stability and maybe where De'Aaron even stands in the hierarchy of it all. As we know, if your franchise player, if your superstar feels really positive about something and then you go completely against it,
right?
That's kind of again much like
you're telling him how you feel.
Yeah, exactly. You're telling them how you're showing him how you feel. And then I also do think that while Mike was still in charge, but I think the losing streak had a big factor too. Like I think this thing was supposed to go a whole lot better this entire season, and I think the fact that they waited pretty much until they absolutely had to get something for Harrison Barnes, and talking about DeMar DeRozan, like I think the fact that every move has felt forced in terms of making the team better, like it's crazy. Keegan Murray, Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter, and Domantas Sabonis were all acquired by this team in 2022. They have not made a significant move to add somebody since besides DeMar DeRozan this entire time. And I think that it's kind of like what Brendan said. I mean, I think it's just a bunch of straws that finally broke the camel's back. And then again, when you go back to De'Aaron after hearing that they were going to make a move to finally make the team better, and then you go back to him and you tell him, we're actually entertaining trades for you. Is that okay? You worried about the wrong thing. It's like, how is this what you're coming back to me with when all that I have asked as a franchise player, as somebody who has stuck through all bad moments with this organization that frankly doesn't deserve a benefit of the doubt, is you come back to me and say, is it okay if we trade you or look to trade you? I just think that's kind of where you went wrong, is by assuming that De'Aaron Fox was just going to continue to play along. And then, I mean, even now he's still playing along. So I don't know. To me, it's just a mess that the front office kind of created themselves. And I just feel like they've kind of created their own mess here.
It almost feels like they suffered from maybe being too polite or giving De'Aaron too much information. So you take the call, right? You don't have to tell De'Aaron.
I think the fear is that if they don't tell De'Aaron though, and then he hears because Rich Paul is his agent, and he hears, wait, so now again, not only did I ask you guys, but now you're going behind my back to try and see if you can move me. I think you put yourself in the situation before. I think that, again, it's just death by 1,000 lashes. Like, they've put themselves in this situation by their actions beforehand.
Right. But you get the call, you call De'Aaron, right? And we're good with that because you essentially have to do it. The issue is just the idea that you're that you're entertaining it, right? I'm still trying to you see what I'm saying? I'm still trying to figure out, is the issue not necessarily how they handled it, just the idea. And you've actually been big on this on Twitter, Brendan. The issue isn't really how they handled it. The issue is just straight up you even deciding to entertain moving De'Aaron before getting him help. Is it that simple?
Yeah, which I agree with you. I think that it's normal for the front office to explore all paths, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the transparency with communicating that to De'Aaron is fine. I think that's a normal process. I think the frustration from De'Aaron's standpoint is what Chris is saying, what we've kind of been laying out is we're really going to talk about this before we even talk about who else we're going to have on this team to help me out. Mm-hmm. Because again, De'Aaron's like shown a loyalty to this team, wanting to be here. The conversation in the offseason wasn't meant to be like a threat. It was just legitimately like, hey, I want to compete for something and I would like to do that here. So give me a reason to think that I can do that. Mm-hmm. And for the conversation that he has with the team to be, hey, we're kind of looking at this a little bit before a deal is even locked in, when they've also expressed that like a deal's kind of right there for a couple of weeks now. And previously, go back to like, I heard that De'Aaron kind of likes Kyle Kuzma, and the Kyle Kuzma Buddy Hield deal years ago almost happened. I think they're playing Pacer highlights in here earlier. I think we can go back to Monty McNair's first deal as the GM of the Sacramento Kings was to trade eventually Halliburton for Domantas Sabonis, but it was very public that they actually would have preferred to move De'Aaron Fox. Right. And you go back to that, De'Aaron had a lingering ankle injury, decided then right before the deadline was the time to take it. It seemed like right away that they were probably going to move on from Fox. So like from there probably is that, not to say that De'Aaron was checked out from there, but again, it's a combination of all of these things. It's the way that he's had to take the brunt of things for the last 2 years and they haven't came out and defended him. It's the unprofessionalism that we've seen from this organization time and time again. And like I said, even from our perspective, we have very little faith that they are going to make the right decisions moving forward. And I think that De'Aaron is very much at that same point. And, you know, you feel a little, I guess, probably just in your feelings and over it when they decide, when all you've been asking is, hey, please go make a trade for a winger forward. And you're really going to come to me right now about, hey, how do you feel about being somewhere else?
Right.
Which, again, I understand it from the front office perspective, and it's a weird thing to be the tipping point, but I think it's less about that moment and all the things that led up to it.
That is a great job laying all that out. And yeah, I think the main thing is people keep putting, I was just trying to lay out to listeners and fans that it is more than just, oh, well, how they handled this is the issue. And I was hearing a lot of how they handled, and I'm thinking, I don't think it's this. It's how we got there. And you go out, you pay a little bit extra because he's the biggest name you've had since, you would say Boogie or Chris Webber, whoever you want to say, and you pay a little extra, even if it costs you Devin Carter, whatever you need to do that's not out of control, and you get John Collins and you say, we got you DeMar DeRozan, we got you John Collins, we are making an attempt, and if he wants to walk away, we can look our fans in the eyes and say, realistically, this is all we could have done. But they can't say that. All right, we're over on time again. We let Brendan and Chris be GMs on the other side. We also have our AEW giveaway, 2 tickets. 2 winners, okay? 2 numbers. Brendan picks one, Chris picks one, because we missed out yesterday. So 2 numbers, 2 chances to get AEW Dynamite. Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports. It is time Win a pair of tickets to all Elite Wrestling at Sacramento Memorial Auditorium on March 5th. All Elite Wrestling brings you an action-packed night of professional wrestling as AEW Dynamite invades the Sacramento Memorial Auditorium on March 5th. We're looking for lucky caller numbers.
It's got to be 5.
5, yeah, gotta be 5.
5 and 5.
5 and 5. Be 5A.
Oh, we needed
5B.
different numbers?
Nope, we're all good.
Cool.
916-339-1140. 916-339-1140. 916-339-1140. So, guys, and Kyle will take care of you. We see him coming in now. Caller number 5 and caller number 5. Guys,
It's going to be at Memorial.
That's right.
Awesome.
Oh, so I asked Kyle, I said, do you know? I've never heard of this place.
Oh,
Sacramento
Memorial
Memorial.
Auditorium. Oh, my gosh.
What's up?
No,
what's up?
I
now?
don't either,
Hold
to be
on, hold
honest.
on now.
Hold on.
Hold
on.
do your thing.
No. What I
was
don't have a thing.
gonna take a picture of it this morning when I biked past
Of
it,
his
just so I
thing?
could tell.
What's happening?
All right, Brendan.
What?
Now he's ran away. Now he's picking a winner. Well, Chris, what's up with the auditorium? It's a 6 spot.
It's just great. I mean, it's right in the heart of downtown, and it's where I graduated. It's where a ton of people graduate high school here in Sacramento.
Wow.
Yeah, Memorial Auditorium's the spot.
Do you think I've never been to a wrestling event.
I've only been actually. You know what's crazy? The only thing I've ever been to at Memorial besides graduation, Kid Cudi concert.
Okay.
So crazy. It was like after he had already kind of came and went, and
Right.
he just randomly stopped through Memorial Auditorium. It was great, but yeah, it's probably a pretty perfect venue actually for wrestling. It's got like the theater,
Right.
like the second deck and all that stuff. It should actually be a really good wrestling spot.
There you go.
Wow, that's cool. That's
Chris
awesome.
can sell it for you.
There you
March 5th coming up, and it's on March 5th, guys.
What? No way.
Will there still be a number 5 on the Sacramento Kings?
I was like, what's the significance?
What did you think, real quick? And you guys are gonna put your GM hats on. I had to ride for. Well, I have 2 things to go over with you. First of all, I had to ride
No Scary
for.
Terry shirt. He said he was going to wear his Terry Rozier shirt
I couldn't find it.
Oh,
I couldn't find it.
because
Rough,
he
Just good timing,
Got
you
caught
know.
up with some prop talk.
rough situation. Two things that
Sorry.
happened last night that I found to be pretty crazy.
Okay.
The first one was how people were freaking out over the NBC Sports poll. Did you see that?
No.
It was, what should the Kings do with De'Aaron?
Their post-game poll?
Oh, I did
And-
see
and
that.
did you
Yeah, I
think
heard
that was-
Dre just talk
Did you
about
think that was a bad look? I thought fans were overreacting a little
it.
bit.
Definitely overreacting. Who cares?
That's what I said.
Yeah.
I didn't see the fan reaction, but I was chuckling a little bit at the poll when I saw it.
I mean,
It's
No,
a very reasonable question.
would we
Well,
not
it's a
put that
timely-
on our YouTube
It
poll?
is a
Like,
timely
what's-
question.
I mean,
bad
people,
about it?
they're clearly NBC and Kings have a partnership, right? It's probably some intern or some social person that's firing this up. And fans took it like, how dare they?
How dare
They
They're
thought it
kicking him
was
outta here.
Monty McNair on a laptop.
Right.
Let me see what these people think.
Yeah,
Let me just see what's popping right now.
like all of the Kings universe isn't asking the same
Right,
question
right.
amongst themselves.
I want to know what people think.
Wow.
So that was number 1. Number 2,
Did we ever get poll results on that, by the
I
way?
did not see. I think they probably pulled it down.
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
ask Tristy.
Number 2 was people coming down Jason Anderson's road when he said this could be the last Kentucky Connection lob. And people were blocking him, saying this is the negativity that I can't stand. People were in
good
their
old Jason.
feelings last night, man. So I rode for Jason a little bit earlier in the show because I'm thinking, come on, guys. Jason has nothing. He's not wrong.
No, he's not.
It looked terrible last night.
I've literally had just texts with Frankie back and forth of like, man, you never thought when you went on leave that you saw your last game
Right.
of De'Aaron Fox in a Kings jersey. Huh?
Somebody's going to block you.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to block
Oh,
you.
I'm sure I had plenty of people that blocked me. Yeah.
So before we get into what the Kings are going to attempt to do on the court, and I know you saw the Warriors beat the Thunder, so
Yeah.
this could get ugly on Saturday. Both of you put your GM hats on. It's 1:36.
7 days away officially from the NBA trade deadline.
Chris Watkins, GM Chris Watkins,
Yeah.
you have a vest on right now.
Okay.
What do you do? What is your first move
Oof.
right now?
Oof.
And I have the option of doing like I can keep De'Aaron if I
You can
want.
do
I can
anything.
trade De'Aaron
You can
if
do
I want.
anything.
If I were them at this point, I would trade De'Aaron. I think that the damage is done from a relationship standpoint. I'm not saying it couldn't be repaired, but it just would never be the same. I would try and trade him, and I would definitely look to San Antonio first. I mean, they have I would say the best collection of young assets and draft capital. I would push hard for Stephon Castle. I would push really hard to get Stephon Castle and Devin Vassell. And I would try and get both of those Atlanta picks that they own. And if I could, try and see if we can get that 2031 or whatever 2030 pick that they just shipped off to get DeMar DeRozan. I would try and get those back and call it a day. I mean, I think Castle is probably the player that I would be most excited from this draft class to work out. He seems like a legitimate two-way player. Devin Vassell, I'm not as high as Brendan is, but he's somebody who's been a good scorer for San Antonio. His contract is already signed, which is good in one aspect, but it's also $24 to $27 million per year, which I'm just not sure he's that caliber of player. But I think getting those two Atlanta picks is great because you don't have to worry about, well, you are trading picks with a team that has Victor Wembanyama, and that's going to be, somewhere in the mid to high 20s for the next 10 years versus Atlanta. That seems like a sinking ship. And if they're not going to have their first round picks to make them better, that seems kind of like, how Boston got the Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum trade with the Brooklyn Nets, just kind of sat on those picks, were able to kind of build out separately and not have to worry about their own success getting in the way of their future development. So yeah, I would try and pursue a trade with San Antonio as aggressively as possible. And if you can't get it done with them, I mean, I kind of think you just open it up to whoever offers the most first round picks at that point. I mean, if they're not going to get some legitimate young piece to be excited about, I kind of feel like you should try and move to these OKC, Utah, kind of situations where you're looking for the next opportunity to pounce on. But even then, I mean, it kind of becomes a conversation of let's just go pie in the sky. And let's say the Kings ship De'Aaron off for a Mikal Bridges trade and get 7 first round picks back. What they're gonna go into the Giannis sweepstakes this offseason? Like I just don't know who. Brendan's been really on this. Like, who is the 1A that the Kings would eventually get or try and get if they do move off from De'Aaron Fox, regardless of if you think De'Aaron's a 1A or a 1B, whatever. At some point, you need to have that kind of caliber player. Where is that player coming from?
Yeah, well, and just real quick, because I want to give you we might have to do you on the other side, Brendan. But the funny thing is, Chris, as we keep talking to these different teams, and maybe I'm late on this. I remember this being a terrible draft, but Stephon Castle, untouchable. Okay, if you ask a Spurs fan.
Sure.
Now,
of course.
Devin, you said Devin Vassell. I'm not too high. Untouchable as well. I found out yesterday.
Okay.
So everybody.
So now it's Jeremy Sohan and Zach Collins,
and Trey
Chris
Jones.
Paul. Okay.
We finally got.
Right.
We didn't even get
not Tyus. Couldn't get Tyus.
We got Trey Jones, and what did it cost you? Everything. Brendan puts on his GM hat on the other side. One more segment with you, and we ask the guys, how can the Kings move forward, or should this thing just be done? Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports. 15 more minutes with you from Dwayne on the text line. We're going to get Brendan's thoughts. He's going to put on his GM hat. Chris, good plan or bad plan? It's probably the plan at this point, depending on if you think that De'Aaron Fox and the idea of keeping De'Aaron Fox is too far gone. Are we hypnotized? Castle and Vassell, more guards, unbelievable. Dwayne, well, Stephon Castle is 6'7". Okay, he's small forward.
He's a 2. Yeah, I mean,
he can handle the ball.
Yeah.
He's not. It ain't Devin Carter. No disrespect. He's 6'6", 6'7". And Devin Vassell. Neither of these guys are potatoes. And again, if you're moving on from De'Aaron, you need Chris.
Probably Kevin Huerter at some point too.
Yeah, and because I don't see pure point guard. Everyone keeps saying the Devin Carter thing. I don't know if. I'm not going to say that they didn't do their due diligence, but I definitely don't see playmaker, pure point guard when I watch Devin Carter.
No, not at all. And I mean, he's even said it as much that I believe he's flat out said, like, I've played most of my career off ball. I mean, like, I can play on ball, absolutely, but he's very, very comfortable playing off ball. And if anything, I mean, I think we've seen that Malik probably is the one that moves to point guard after that. I mean, he's the one who's been playmaking. And I mean, that connection with Domas is very legit and is something that, if Malik is going to be the primary ball handler, like, you could see how that could be scaled up a significant amount. But I think Malik is probably still this. I mean, if De'Aaron's not here, he's the team's pretty much only ball handler at that point.
Yeah, I mean,
main facilitator, main ball handler.
They've been working on it with Colby Jones. They've been working on it with Keon Ellis. They've been working on it with these guys, and they just have. But that's why you get Trey Jones.
That's right. That's right. 100%.
Chris Paul.
That's why you get
CP3.
Brett, sorry, this person is just convinced we want Fox gone, and they just keep texting the same thing. You know who you are, 916. Brendan, putting on your GM hat. What would you do, good sir? Right now, the time is 1:45 on the dot.
Yeah, it's a tough one because it depends if you feel like the situation's cooked, and I don't think it's past the point of recovery, but like as if there's just no world, but it's extremely unlikely, I think, that you're salvaging this at this point, which makes me lean towards like, do it now. You probably get the most assets right now compared to whatever you're dealing with in the deadline. And while San Antonio is clearly his preferred place, no questions asked, that doesn't mean that that's where you have to get the return from necessarily. Like there's 3-team deals that come into play, or maybe you get assets and like Chris was saying, it makes you a real threat for some of these other guys in the offseason, or if you wait till the offseason, like what if Lauri Markkanen is somehow the main piece that you're getting back in a deal, or Brandon Ingram is floated out there, you know, like you could go more in those win now directions. But me personally, if it's totally up to me, I am fully resetting. I am.
Now, what does that mean now,
like
good sir?
Everybody. Like
now,
I'd move on from DeMar DeRozan. I'd move on from Domantas Sabonis. I'd move on from Malik Monk. I'd probably keep Keegan Murray and Devin Carter. And you have the 11th pick currently as the Kings. Atlanta has the 10th odds currently, which is a pick owned by the Spurs. And this is a very, very good draft class. And I know people I don't expect them to do this at all. I think that they want to remain competitive. And I think that they can do that to an okay extent, depending on what your definition of competitive is. But me personally, like I said, like the main thing here is you're losing your 1A. Your only guy that I think could even flirt with being a number one in a postseason. That's where Fox, I think you're really going to feel his absence is in the postseason. Obviously, you have to get there first, right. But less so maybe in the regular season. Maybe Malik can pick it up, blah, blah, blah. I think you need a number one. And the way that you get that as a team in Sacramento is through the draft. And this draft is really, really good. Next year's draft is really, really good. And I know it's not fun. I'd bottom out for 2-3 years. I don't think they're going to do that at all. I think that they're going to try and remain competitive, and maybe you can get some pieces that still mean you're getting the 8th pick in the draft with that Atlanta pick or whatever direction you may want to go in there. So I think that they probably will remain competitive throughout all this, whether that means De'Aaron's on the team through the rest of this year, or it means that, you know, it's this offseason that we make a deal. I think that it's inevitable that a deal is going to take place, whether, again, deadline, offseason, whatever that may be. And you're going to try to retool and just pray that you get the SGA that they got in a Paul George trade. And I've seen that mentioned a lot. I think it's extremely unlikely. It's about as outlier of a scenario as you get. It's not like SGA was viewed as somebody that anybody thought would be even a number one on a future team, really. And so maybe you get lucky with a Stephon Castle, or if you decide to pivot to Ingram or something. Yeah, I mean, you never know what these guys could turn into. And I think, again, that they can remain competitive. They can remain a 500 team, play-in sort of thing, even without De'Aaron Fox. But what are you really working towards? Right. And I thought that was the clearest thing that Mike Brown did, was that the goal is an eventual championship. And I thought that Monty's had that same messaging since he first got here, and we're working towards that. And now it just feels a lot more reactionary rather than planned, thought through, you know, these are the steps we want to take, because they've kind of sat on their hands for a year and a half here.
Yeah. And you make a good point about what happens if you move on from De'Aaron Fox, because we were kind of joking about John Collins. I don't know if you saw, he spoke with a Jazz reporter, and he said, I'm kind of glad that I'm not moving. And we were trying to make sure that, hey, I don't think this is a Sacramento thing. The Kings are a mess right now, right? But there are the D'Angelo Russells of the world that just want to hoop. Kyle Kuzma was a guy who just wants to hoop and make money. And I don't think that that's Domantas Sabonis. I don't think Domantas Sabonis just wants to hoop. I think he wants to compete. This dude went to Gonzaga. He's a winner. He wants to compete. I definitely don't think Malik Monk just wants to be out here hooping. They bought in. Now, was Mike Brown perfect? No. But they bought into the idea of playing for something. So if you move on from De'Aaron Fox, you're not just going to have some dudes that just want to roll the ball out every night and play for nothing, right? So that's something that will have to be addressed if they move in that direction. You know what's funny? You guys remember, and Chris, me and you, we talked about this specifically, I believe, and we joked about it, and now I don't want to say jokes on us yet, but you remember when the DeMar DeRozan trade went down, and it might have been on the 4-letter network, but there was a big, it was a big sign, and they did winner of the trade, who won the DeMar DeRozan trade, and who lost.
Oh, right.
Does anybody remember who they said?
Spurs were probably
The
the winners.
Spurs won the trade.
Yeah, with an A.
The Spurs
Kings
won
got
the
it.
trade.
Yeah, with Chicago probably losing. Yeah.
No, I think the Kings lost.
They,
The Kings
both
had
of
like
them
a D
lost.
plus or
I think they
something.
both got D's
Yeah,
and
because
C's.
people were obsessed with the 2030 or the
Right.
2031 or whatever.
And who would have thought months later, if they end up winning that trade, now again, they would, that swap we think would go back to the Kings, but then they would net back De'Aaron Fox. Never saw it coming. Never saw it coming.
No.
The other part of this,
Changes
guys,
fast in the
Yeah.
NBA.
I mean, it really does. The other part of this, guys, before we get out of here, and thanks for joining me. The other part of this is the timeline, right? Brendan, you're giving people hope in saying that this thing is.
I know.
Well,
I was thinking the same
well,
thing.
and
I'm like,
it's
wow.
not completely done yet. But guys, I just don't see how this team can continue to do the dead man walking thing. I mean, it was
Agreed.
bad yesterday. So I know they technically have until
Saturday, right?
well,
You're saying deadline, right?
the deadline, but can they let this team go out 3 more games like this?
Oh, they definitely can.
Well, they can.
They
but
definitely can.
When's that Orlando home game?
That's it's Wednesday. It's the day before.
Because I was like, that really is a date to circle of like, you do not
The
want
5th.
this thing to still be going on
They have a back-to-back.
when fans get back.
That
Yeah.
is the day before the trade deadline.
Yeah, then they fly to Portland.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
has to be taken care of before that. I mean, obviously, that's the day before, but it's like, that is a situation where if you let people vocalize how they feel,
Oh, no.
not only do you have to worry about, hey, like, here's pregame intros, like, I mean,
maybe he
we're
doesn't
talking
play.
about people yelling from the stands, like towards the bench, towards
Yeah.
who knows? I mean, I think, and that still might happen, but I think, I think you definitely want to at least have this thing situated by the time that Orlando, or the Kings, I should say, come back to town on Wednesday.
He's got the finger thing. They can say, hey, we're resting.
For sure.
He's resting his finger.
For sure. It wouldn't surprise me if we reach that point.
It already should be at that point, honestly. I was a little surprised he played yesterday.
Yeah.
This is
Because if he
Crazy.
would have got, I mean, you want to talk about dysfunction and chaos. De'Aaron Fox, like, goes down with it and, like, just can't be traded because he's injured.
he could
That's
decide,
a
hey,
problem.
I'm going to get surgery on this pinky. You know?
Yes.
Like, he's not that guy.
going to
I
do
don't think
that.
he's that
not
guy.
going
I
to
think
do
I think behind the scenes wise, like, it's weird for all these guys, but I also don't think that De'Aaron, like, De'Aaron doesn't, none of this is coming directly from
Right.
De'Aaron,
Right.
by the way. He talked to Chris Biederman, was it yesterday, day before, and made it clear, I didn't request a trade. I'm still like, I'm here to play basketball. I'm going to keep doing that. I don't think that he is going to make it weird behind the scenes. He's so far from a Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
You know, he's not
Right.
going to call up, I can't even think of her name, Rachel Nichols, and have an interview after a game, after a practice.
Right.
You know, like, I think that he can remain like fine throughout all this personality, that nonchalant nature that like people will get on him for after losses. Like, I think that helps somewhat in all of this, in it not being weird with the teammates. Like, yes, you're hearing everything, you know what's going on. It's probably more weird for some guys than others, but you got to just be professional and go out there and keep trying to take care of business on the team you're currently on. And De'Aaron's somebody that I think will do that just fine. But, you know, maybe you reach a point where it is best to sit him for this finger thing for a little while you try and navigate this complicated situation, but it's not as much as I think it's likely he gets traded before the deadline. It's not a lock. It takes two to tango. If they don't like what they're hearing, then you might as well wait until the offseason. It's not like you have to move him before this deadline. You want to, and it's probably most beneficial to you. But if it's not there, then you're going to wait.
And then they band together and get to the second round.
Yeah, and you want to talk about chaos.
That's when don't move him, because I do feel like they're going to mess around and get in the playoffs. All right. That's Brandon Nunez.
He's also going to be named an all-star later today, or what?
Well, let's get DeMontis Sabonis in there first.
Okay.
That's Brandon Nunez. That's Chris Watkins. Thank you to both of them for joining us. Go follow them on social media. Return of the Roar, new episode out right now, so be sure to check that out. Thank you to Jason Bede, who